Hey guys, welcome back to FPL Fran. Today's video is going to be my Game Week 37 team selection. I'm recording this video just after a very terrible loss to Man City in the Champions League semi-final at the Etihad. They thoroughly deserved it, and of course, good luck to them in the Champions League final. They really do look like the best team in the world by a far margin. Of course, it wasn't actually that far apart in the league with Arsenal so far, but I think we can comfortably say that they're devastatingly good and thoroughly deserved. As far as Game Week 37, though, they were a bit dismaying, I would say, in their match versus Everton. So that's something to think about too when we'll talk about City. I think they'll be one of the biggest talking points this week because you need to sort of anticipate potential scenarios and the likelihood of starts and even maybe double starts for some of these City players, particularly based on whether there's going to be rest from this Champions League game and whether, of course, if City were to win the league versus Chelsea at home, we get to see some major rotation, Pep style. And we haven't really seen in recent years, of course, City having the opportunity to rest and rotate players after winning the league early on with 2 games in hand. But that could be your reality with the Brighton game and also the Brentford game, their last 2 games of the season being games where they might have already won the league and don't actually have anything to play for because there's not even records to really set with this City team at present. As far as the Newcastle Brighton players, we still have 1 game in hand. I'm recording this, of course, at Wednesday evening, so we still have a game to go where hopefully Isak captaincy can redeem himself a bit and probably not suffer as much to the Wilson captaincy. I also have Trippier and Botman, who've been a bit dismaying so far, but Trippier actually had some great opportunities to get assists, very much like so in recent weeks, and actually his underlying stats have continuously been fantastic. So I think it's nice to say with hindsight that owning Trippier has been a colossal failure for the last 10 weeks, and he's a bit of an EO shield. But the reality is Trippier has actually had plenty of opportunities to haul, and he's been a bit unfortunate, and that's what we have to kind of say and conclude. As far as someone like Shaw, continuously fantastic at home, and this is something that we have seen from this United team. They've actually emerged as the 3rd best team when it comes to underlying defense this season. Whether that actually remains to be the case for the remaining fixtures is something that I wouldn't really dispute because they have some really easy fixtures, and I would even consider, of course, when you're looking at transfer plans this week, to maybe move towards a double United defense if possible, if you're not going for something like Bruno, Rashford and Shaw as the ideal and most optimal Man United triple up. As far as Steele, we got some positive news that Sanchez actually hasn't traveled to Newcastle, so that's going to be an opportunity, of course, to say that Steele is a really good transfer if you, for whatever reason, don't have triple Brighton. And Steele could actually give you a lot of budget flexibility on Game Week 37. So if you're looking for a transfer for a keeper, looking for a downgrade, trying to save costs somewhere, then Steele is absolutely the best player to go for, as he also has a double. And potentially we could look at a player like Ederson maybe being rotated on the Brighton away fixture. We don't know what happens there, but Trent and Salah continuously fantastic. And what I will say, of course, that Liverpool have been slightly outscoring their goal expectations and potentially performing a little bit better on defense than we would usually expect. Based on the underlying numbers, but they have showed some steady improvements in terms of actually creating very good net XG. And so that suggests, of course, that they've solidified their back a little bit, but also actually just steadily been consistent when it comes to chance creation. We've seen that, of course, with the underlying stats with Trent emerging really well in this 3-2 structure that they're kind of playing out of when they're on the ball. So this is going to be, for me, a week once again to say I would keep Trent in my team at all costs. And I don't really see any City punts in terms of the defenders being worthwhile as a transfer out. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. Although I would say, on the other hand, you could look to go out of Botman, go out of Trippier as well if you're looking forwards, because the Chelsea last game fixture doesn't scream fantastic in Game Week 38. Neither does Leicester really, because the upside, I would say, of City defense probably trumps a Trippier versus Leicester game. Whereas with Trent, you're actually dealing with 2 fantastic fixtures, which is going to be 37-38. And the same logic with Salah, but he might actually be on one of my transfer plans. As far as Brighton players, not really get to touch them. And Isak, still something that I'm going to look at where he might get rested versus Leicester potentially, because we could see him get back-to-back starts versus Brighton. And that could impact, for example, whether Wilson is actually the one who gets the start in the Brighton or the Leicester fixture. So we have to kind of stay tuned into that. Watkins a little bit dull, I would say, because he was actually pretty close to 1 goal, 1 assist, but ended up getting that free kick assist, just like Foden did on my bench. But that's how things stand because, of course, Rashford was injured for the game week. As far as my transfer plans, so just looking ahead, I've got 2 variations of transfers that I really am interested in. The first variation is Salah to Fernandes and a rolled transfer. What is the power of this move? I think the power of this move is looking towards Game Week 38. Looking at how the season has played out so far, we've got a lot of deadline leaks, and this is going to be, once again, another opportunity on Game Week 38 to take advantage of these deadline leaks. Now, what advantage could we take? I would actually say this is an opportunity where in Game Week 38, some teams will actually have nothing to play for, right? There's a very high likelihood that Arsenal will pretty much secure their 2nd place spot in the league, that City will also have won the league, and therefore those 2 teams might not necessarily have things to play for, you could see some rotation from those teams as well. I don't think it's right to say that Arteta and Pep will actually stick with their first teams, particularly Pep, of course, because he will have to prepare for the FA Cup for the FA Cup final, sorry. And therefore, Salah to Fernandes seems like a nice move because you're only really losing Salah for one game week fixture here, which is going to be for Aston Villa. And then maybe one of my transfers is going to be a combination of a play which allows for Salah back whilst also retaining Fernandes in my team. That could be one option. Or I could simply just go from Fernandes back to Salah as well. So that is going to be one move that probably gets me, of course, the additional fixture of Fernandes versus Chelsea too, when we really look at the comparison of the single versus double. And Fernandes has actually been building some really consistent underlying stats. But I think it's also worth saying that this United team have some pretty poor finishers when it comes to players like Weghorst and even potentially even Sancho, you could argue, have not really been able to be as clinical as possible with some of the great chances that Fernandes has built. In the previous matches, actually, Fernandes has been one of the best expected goal involvement players so far. And so you could argue a haul is due, but I don't think it's wrong to say that United just simply have some unclinical players. As far as the second transfer option, this is kind of really trading Foden out and bringing Alvarez in. So kind of keeping one of the City punts in the team for another. So Foden is someone that we do expect to maybe start one of the matches in Game Week 37, but I think my confidence in him starting in one of the games is more so within the Brighton game, because I see this as, once again, another opportunity to play Grealish versus Chelsea, play your first string team versus Chelsea, a much easier fixture that's going to be at home once again. You've seen Grealish actually get back-to-back rests in the Premier League, so this would be a good time to actually allow him to play once again. I do think he'll be rested. Of course, we need to kind of keep and monitor the calf situation that he was talking about, where he had a cramp in the previous week, but I do think from a fitness point of view, Grealish has gotten sufficient rest to actually get back-to-back starts now, one from the Champions League, one from the Premier League, and therefore play the game versus Chelsea, which probably means that I'm looking at Foden versus Brighton away. And for me, there's not so much upside with that, so I kind of like that transfer out. Watkins to Alvarez screams a lot of upside, but I do lose Isak and that Leicester fixture, because if I do see an opportunity for Isak to start versus Leicester, and maybe the Newcastle-Brighton game will actually color my opinion on this, then I could actually just simply put Isak on the bench and then actually go for this transfer variation here, which is the second one, to go from Watkins to Alvarez. I don't necessarily see myself needing to play Watkins in Game Week 38, particularly if I go into Alvarez, so this is going to be why I'm going for this sort of move here. When it comes down to it, as things stand, I'm actually going to go with transfer variation 2, so that actually means keeping Salah in my team. So I'm going to go with Steele, Trent, Trippier, and Shaw. Shaw, obviously, for the purposes of the double. This will allow me triple United by going for Fernandes on both variations. I just think he's one of the priority targets that I would like to go for. I also think that Trippier and Trent have independently great games from a clean sheet point of view. Also, just the attacking underlying stats that they both have, where I do think that that sort of offsets the chance of bringing in, let's say, a United defender or even a City defender. Both those teams potentially have some great double fixtures when it comes down to it, because simply doubles are better than singles, but you could see rotation, right? Varane is coming back from an injury, Lindelof could be rotated, and ultimately you could also see a situation where with City, Diaz could be rotated, Akanji, even Stones can be rotated because Ake could be coming back into the lineup, Laporte could be getting some minutes too. As far as Salah, Matoma, McAllister, Fernandes, and Rashford, this has pretty much been one of my default teams a couple of weeks ago. I think I owned Grealish as well in place of someone like a Salah. This team is extremely formidable, and I think when you also look towards Game Week 38, where once again Brighton and United have important fixtures to play, even Liverpool, this is a really nice midfield that I wouldn't really touch in Game Week 38, because the way I see things, it's that a team like Brighton will still probably have something to play for on Game Week 38. And same with United, same with Salah as well. So that's kind of how I see things. As far as Haaland Alvarez, this is a great time to actually punt Alvarez for now, in my opinion, just simply because I needed the cash flexibility to get Foden out of my team so that I could enable Fernandes. And I don't really see Alvarez as the gem of this team. I think he's very, very close to Isak, who's going to be on my bench this week. But as I said, you have the chance to punt on a double. Alvarez will probably get minutes both in the Chelsea game and the Brighton game. So that's kind of why I feel like this is a good opportunity to target someone like Alvarez here and go for him this week as a make weight for Watkins and take Watkins out of my team. And that's going to be my Game Week 37 team selection. So I hope you guys have a wonderful week ahead. And of course, the captaincy will be on Haaland. Although if I get a gut feeling potentially that Haaland will be benched one of those games, then Rashford is going to be my second captaincy option. But it's tough, of course, because Rashford's minutes might not be particularly high. And I'm also not that confident in a McAllister or even a Fernandes captaincy at this point in time. So it's going to be Haaland for me.